Hey everyone, welcome to our Wednesday edition of the Other Side of Addiction podcast. I am your host, Al Richards, and I'm really excited to have my lovely friend, Margaret Thompson. Margaret, thank you so much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me again.
Oh, absolutely. This is, I think, the second time you've been on the show, and it's always a pleasure. It's crazy how people can become friends so quickly, right? Just by doing even a podcast.
Right. Yeah,
Yeah.
no, it's amazing. I think it's a connection. I had a quote, and I will not remember exactly the words, on my newsletter this past week, and it was Carl Jung, the famous therapist, and he said basically that two people come together and there's a chemistry, and that's a connection, and it happens when you have shared interests and shared passions, but it can just happen when people meet each other, and it's a very neat concept. I do think there's truth in that. You never know who you're going to meet. Stay open.
Right. Yeah. And that is so true. And this is, one of the things I love about doing shows like this, because I get to meet people from all over, and it is crazy because I have become such great friends with every single one of them, and I just love it. It's so cool to know I got friends in North Carolina or Canada or Wisconsin. I mean, it's so crazy.
It is. And I think what you just said was really part of the putting podcasts out there that I didn't expect, was how I would meet some of the most incredible people that I wouldn't otherwise have probably met and get to know. And I have friends that I would never have dreamed or connected with in any other platform. It's kind of one of the neat side perks of doing podcasting, is who you get to meet, who you get to have conversations with.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, guys, today on our show, we're going to be talking about family relapse and also coping with relapse. And I think this is a really, really good topic. And the reason why is I have ran into something in my life here just in the past few weeks where this has happened. And I was speaking with Margaret a little bit before the show, and it's hard, Margaret. It's really hard because I've learned a lot of skills doing these shows, right? And I've had some amazing guests, like you've said, on the show, and they have taught me a lot. And some have been over Zoom, some have been in the studio. I've met a ton of people in the recovery community here in Salt Lake City. And you think you have something, right? You think you've got some control over some stuff, especially with your own emotions. Mm-hmm. And then it happens to you again. And it literally floors you. I mean, seriously, my anger, my heartache, and my frustration, it was like I never got rid of it. It surfaced like that fast. And then I'm sitting back afterwards and I'm going, what did I just do? What did I just do? I thought I had this. How come it's so hard for us as family members to not do what I did, to not respond so negatively so quick?
So it's a complex question, but let's break it down. What I think is very true in all situations with relapse or return to use, when somebody has been in recovery, is it hits us on different emotional levels. If it was secretive and then we found out, there's that component. If it was a long period of sobriety and then a return to use, and there was this comfort and pattern that had developed, there's a huge loss there. There's the old characteristic that we don't lose if we're on the family side of control, that pops right back up, like instantaneously. And what I often say to families is, look at it from the standpoint of the person with an addiction to a substance or a behavior, how that relapse can happen for them so quickly to old behavior patterns that come along with the use. Like that, once it starts, we're no different. When we get taken back to those places that are familiar to us from our past and how we coped from our past, even though we have learned and added tools to our toolbox, there is an instinctive response that I think is very animal or basic in all of us, that those original ways of strategizing, coping, more importantly, reacting, come up fast and furious. And I think that anger is a protective mechanism that many people fall into. It doesn't protect us, but it feels more like it's productive than just feeling the despair and pain.
Yeah, and it's so cool that you said that, because I spoke with a good friend of mine last night, and that's pretty much how he put it. You know, it's our safety mechanism, right? It doesn't matter how long we have buried it. It just takes less than a split second to resurface itself, because we're protecting ourselves. You know, and I was really beating myself up for reacting the way that I reacted. And he really helped me last night. You know, he said, Al, don't beat yourself up. Your body was doing its natural thing. You know, just think on it, though. Just think a little bit on, you know, give yourself some time to heal from it, but don't beat yourself up from it. Because that is, like you said, it's our natural mechanism, right? To just automatically get angry and just go after what it is we're going after.
For some of us, that's the first go-to. For other people, it's not even feeling those feelings and going into fix, manage, control instantaneously. And for other people, it's despair that comes first. So we all have our own ways of doing it. I think the other piece, though, is beating ourselves up is what benefit to us or to them. We're human, all of us, and we're trudging a road that is a difficult road. We have to recognize that, and we have to recognize that it is very easy to fall into what is familiar from many years of being programmed to do it that way.
Yeah.
And that the new work we do is still there. We didn't lose it, but in certain trigger points, certain familiar situations, certain tapes we know, we can find we get overridden by our base reactions, our familiar reactions, because it is so instinctive, rather than that brain of ours working from the place of executive functioning. We're more in survival mode. And when we're in survival mode, all bets are off. We're probably going to fight, we're going to freeze, we're going to run, or we're going to caretake. So for you, fight sounds like is the way that your body responded.
Yeah. You know, and just so our listeners know, Margaret is the founder of Embrace Family Recovery. So if you cannot tell by the way she's speaking, she knows her stuff. So and again, I love having Margaret on here, because I'm learning from her, because she works with families all the time that go through this. So you know, Margaret, what scared me, though, again, is, and I think I shared this with you a little bit on when I was a guest on your show, or maybe the first time you was on mine. In my early 20s, I went through anger management, right? Because I had a terrible temper. It took me 6 months of therapy to learn how to finally pull the reins back when I knew I was starting to run way too fast. It happened so quick. Those blinders closed in on me so quick. And I really believe, like I was telling my friend Nick last night, that's what really scared me. I could feel my fists doubling up. I could feel those blinders closing in to where all I was seeing was just right in front of me. There was nothing else off to the side. If I would have hurt this individual, I don't know what that would have done to me. It probably would have just tore me up to where I'd probably go out and relapse, right? Because that's how bad it scared me. When I was done, I was literally, my hands were doing this. Yeah, I did reach in my tool pouch and back off, because I'm like, I got to get out of here. I got to get the heck out of here before I do something I'm going to regret. It just amazed me of how quick it scared me.
Of course. And if you didn't scare you, wouldn't that be more scary?
I guess I never thought of it that way. Yeah.
Isn't it also progress that you did back off?
It is. Yeah.
And so, yes, do we feel, this is me, do I feel badly when my behavior at someone who is sick, spiritually, emotionally, physically, mentally sick? Do I feel badly when I behave in that way, in the way that I'm not okay with? Of course. What can I do about it? Make amends, when appropriate, clean up my side of the street, look at the progress I made. Did I do as much as I would have in the past, or was I able to stop myself? To be also really aware of our physiological responses that are beyond our control, that we may have been disconnected from in the past because of using, because of caretaking, because of being in the insanity for so long of the roller coaster of the disease. So like, even though, yes, I hear you, you wish you had not gotten that triggered, that you went to those feelings or those behaviors, I think it's really important to acknowledge that, yes, I didn't go to where I wish I could have gone if I was in my Zen state, but I didn't go back to where I've been in the past. And that's due to my work, what I do.
So just like my friend Nick said, yeah, don't beat yourself up over it, because you did what you needed to do. However, you still protected yourself. How many times do you have family members come in and work with you that happens to? I mean,
That reaction of rage?
Yeah, the reaction of rage, to where, they come in and they've worked with you, and they're getting such great information. They're getting so many tools to put in their pouch to help them get through whatever they get through. And then at a drop of a pen, it's gone just like that. Does that happen quite often?
Yeah, well, I think it goes back to what I said earlier, that I think we have to look at the parallels of how quickly people return to a substance use that is killing them.
Yeah.
And we like to, as family members, protect ourselves by judging them for that. Like, how could you? How did you? What we have to recognize is the humanity of all of us, that we don't always respond. It's always reaction in that spot, whether we're using and returning to use or returning to codependent or controlling or angry behavior, that we have still got work to do, that we're never going to be perfect at this. I have families come to me with a wide variety of reactions to their person. And one of the tools that I would give out to anybody who finds their anger getting in front of them, between them and their people, whether it be the person who's relapsed, whether it be the person who's in early recovery, whether it be it's coming out sideways at the partner, whether it's coming out sideways at the kid, I always look at, where can we put that anger so that it doesn't hurt us or someone we love? The obvious answer is at the disease. And yet it gets off scot-free time and time again. So I'll often give out suggestions to my clients of writing a uncensored letter, like literally sitting down and either recording it with a device or writing with a pen and just venting uncensored at the disease of addiction for what it has done to me, to the person that I love, to other members of the family, and just getting out some of those feelings that we keep bottled up inside that come out sideways at the human beings in our life rather than at the disease.
Wow, I love that idea. I'm even thinking while you were saying that, I'm like, oh my gosh, what a great talk, right? What a great thing to talk about doing a speaking gig, and just, how dare you do this? Because this is the first time I've ever heard this. We do.
I had to do it.
Really?
I had to do it. Yes.
Wow.
I had to do it when I was in the relationship with my ex-fiance, who had his own sexual compulsion. And one of the wise people in my world said to me, it was a little different. Mine wasn't so much the anger, it was the loss of the dream. I had to write out the fantasy that I was no longer going to have and grieve it. So for me, if somebody's presenting as angry, it's that residual undercurrent. Because when we're in that place only, we miss out on the joy, we miss out on the pleasure, we miss out on so many other emotions if we're just, plus we're not that much fun to be around.
Right.
And so having an outlet that doesn't hurt oneself and doesn't hurt another person is a really healthy thing. And again, stop letting the disease off scot-free. Put it where it belongs. The disease has created this turmoil, this pain, this destruction through that person that you love and through yourself.
Yeah, it's almost like one of the space movies, like Alien, right? It finds a host and then feeds off that host.
I think that's true. It's not selected, like we don't choose it.
No,
it chooses us. And some of us get it and some of us don't. And when it's in charge, it changes the makeup of the person who has it. So yeah, use that. If that's a visual that works for people, I can run with that. I'm not a spacey person, but I can run with it.
Well, yeah, I'm just kind of thinking of it that way, right? I mean,
I love
when
analogies.
you
I
see
love
movies like
visuals.
that, yeah,
Yeah, I love visuals and analogies, and what works for one person may not work for the other, but I think it makes, yeah, it's a great visual. I get it.
yeah, yeah. God, that I'm so glad that you said that, because holy cow, like you said, it gets off scot-free all the time. We're always angry at the individual. Like you
For
just said, how,
ourselves.
how dare you do that to us again? Right? And I said that. I literally said that. How dare you bring this back into our life again? Right? Wow. That's powerful.
Well, the other thing that it doesn't do is allow us to beat ourselves up, right? Not only them, but us. So
Yeah.
recognizing how it's changed us and how it's affected us by being in a partnership with someone with the illness, that, it's the master puppeteer over all of us. And so put it where it goes, not at each other. And it's not something you would ever read to that person, right? This is something for you as an outlet, something maybe you would share with a coach or a sponsor or a therapist, or maybe not share with anyone, just burn it because you feel like you got the release you needed and give it back to the universe. But I think that it's a neat tool. And I'm amazed, because I've done variations of it, at what comes out when I give myself permission. I don't censor myself. I don't spell check. I just get it out, because I don't want to hurt people with my words that are absolutely not about them or meant for them.
I'm going to do that. I'm going to sit down with my notepad and yeah, I think I know I don't think I know once I get running with it, I'm sure I'm going to fill quite a few pages.
My guess you will too.
Yeah. Yeah. So how do you, I mean, do you use this for families? So when a family comes in and says, okay, this is what's happened to my loved one, now they have to cope with it, right? They have to learn how to deal with it. And I took a family support program through USAR. It's called Craft. And I learned quite a bit. And again, like I said, I did learn some things. However, I fell backwards. What do you tell families how to cope with it? I mean, do you tell them, like you said earlier, don't be angry at yourself. This is just a normal reaction. However, fix your hair, straighten your makeup, do whatever you need to do, and start moving forward again?
So what I'm hearing you ask is, what do I do with families when the relapse has happened and they feel their behavior hasn't been where they wish it had been?
Yeah, yeah.
Grace. We talk about grace. We talk about grace to ourselves and grace to the person who's suffering next to us. Excuse me. We talk about humanity in ourselves. And what I always do with my families is really have them focus on their side of the street. You hear that in recovery. Sorry, I'm going to cough.
No, no worries.
Excuse me, everyone. That was a pain. Okay, so one of the things that unfortunately tends to happen in the relapse pattern, or naturally happens is probably a better word, is many family members then start thinking about, how do I get this from going off the rails completely? How do I intervene with them and go back to that old behavior that they maybe started with many years ago with the disease? So the big thing is, okay, what is your role with this person? What is your responsibility? Are they an adult? Are they a minor? And if they're an adult and they have chosen to leave, say, do they know you're there? Do they know you're available if they want help, that you'll help them get help? Are you willing to keep that door open? What boundaries have you set to protect yourself from their disease? Are you not being verbally abused by their disease? And if you are, what boundaries do you set to protect yourself from that? And then where's this wreckage from this experience for you? Like, where are you feeling, I did well, I didn't like how I did this, I wish I'd done that, can't change what I would have could have done, what can I do about anything I can clean up? Because I think the thing about recovery on the family side is, we as families relapse as fast, if not faster, than the person with a substance use disorder.
Interesting.
So we don't acknowledge that, because on the family side, the relapse doesn't look near as devastating. So it's easy to almost judge that it's not as bad. But the relapse on the family side happens very fast. A lot of family members relapse way before their loved one has picked up again. Sorry.
Hmm.
I have a tickle for some reason.
Don't worry.
So it's a matter of looking at what relapse looks like for the family. And I think we walk it backwards around triggers, right? What are my triggers that lead to relapse? Not what are their triggers? What do I have to watch out for them? But what do I have to protect and care for in myself? And I know the circumstances you're speaking of are kind of after the fact of the relapse that you went through and your behavior. And so I think that it's important to deconstruct, walk it backwards. And I don't mean theirs, ours, and look at what have I let go in my program? What have I not taken care of in my recovery? What tools have I not been using that are really important self-care tools to help me be more able to cope in ways that I feel better about? Hungry, angry, lonely, tired. Am I protecting myself around those 4 horsemen, those ones that will take us down every time? If I am hungry, if I am angry, if I am lonely, and if I am tired, whether I am a family member or someone with an addiction, I am way more susceptible to relapse. What stressors and changes in life have been happening? And have I put aside those basic things that I usually do for care? Meditation, prayer, literature, meetings, community of supports, connecting with friends. What is it, what changes have happened that may have been harder for me to stay the course of my feeling like I'm doing okay in my recovery? And maybe none of those things were going on for you. You were just caught off guard in this moment of, really? This is where we are now? I can't believe it. I think we also have to look at, in the deconstruction, where's our shame? Where's our judgment? Where's our stigma?
Yeah.
I was reading about that today in a post about stigma. And yeah, we had a lot of work to do to help destigmatize mental illness, addiction, and so forth. And thankfully, shows like this with you, Al, and other podcasts and people sharing their stories and their recoveries help. I think the biggest job first is really taking an exploratory look inside of ourselves at what stigmas and shame we carry that we've never cleaned up. You said earlier, and I hope it's okay to say this, that there was discussion of how much you speak to this and know, and yet, quote, don't do it or didn't do it.
Yeah, I was called a hypocrite.
Okay.
Yeah.
Internally, one would maybe explore whether that's how you felt, or how's this going to look when I am putting my face out there about being in recovery. And one of the things that I admire tremendously, Al, is when people are truthful about their relapse, whether family or person, because it does happen. And internally, if we start secretly trying to keep that makes me wonder what I'm keeping the secret for. Like, what am I trying to protect? Probably not me, the healthy me, maybe the ego, maybe the pride, maybe the disease, maybe who knows what, right? So I think there's a lot of unpacking of stigma and shame within each of us. I had someone ask me about my own beliefs around addiction. And I am very transparent in that I didn't believe it was a disease before I landed. I didn't fully believe it with my ex. I didn't believe it fully until I landed in Center City, Minnesota at a treatment center, and I was in a training program. And I had to read the Big Book of AA. That's my very busy, well-loved Big Book of AA, which is such an important study guide for me in my own recovery. And I really judged people. I'm not proud of it. turns out I have an addiction too. So I was judging me.
Yeah.
And I really had to come to terms with those judgments and that stigma that was internalized, that somehow I was flawed or I was judged or looked down upon. Well, is that because that's what society does, or is that because internally that's what I was still struggling with doing with myself and other people? So all of that, I don't even know where it all went, but those are some of the thoughts that came up from your question.
And we talk a lot about stigma on the show, quite a bit. That's one of our missions on our show, is to help get rid of it. And I've shared, I'm just as guilty at it, and I am a firm believer now, at least for me, when people are out there pointing their fingers or making comments about other individuals, I think we do it to help boost our own ego, which you said, right? Because we are actually suffering from something. So we're like, well, if we can say something about someone else, see, we're not so bad.
Mm-hmm.
And I was just as guilty. Go downtown Salt Lake City, see the unsheltered down there and the addicts and alcoholics, and make my comments under my breath, or whoever was in the vehicle with me, until I got involved in the recovery community and started realizing who these individuals really are. Mm-hmm. They're just like me. They're just like you. They're just like they're our neighbors. They're no one different, right? Yeah. But yet, for some reason, they're looked at as that they're not welcome here. And someone said that they see them as them being broken. And in a way, they are broken a little bit because they're suffering from something with inside, right? There's something that has shattered their heart or their soul, and they just don't want to feel it anymore. So they're doing the best they can to do something to help them forget about it. It's just, I think the stigma can come back fairly quick, though, because there's times I have still gone downtown and see someone and you can tell that they are high as a kite, and those old patterns coming back, like, oh my gosh, why don't they? And then I'm like, whoa, pull the reins back. Wait a minute here. I don't know who this individual is. I don't know what they've gone through in their life. I'm not any better than them because I've suffered from things myself. And luckily, I haven't gotten to the point where they're at, right? So, yeah.
I think the thing that was given to me that I really try to remember is, there by the grace of God go I, which is a saying in recovery, that I am spared it for no doing of my own, my birthright, my circumstances, my education, my job, like I've done parts to help myself, but there's people out there who didn't ever have those opportunities, right? The other piece of it is to see the people as hurting, spiritually sick people. And if that is what we see, is it okay to judge that? Or do we have compassion for that? And the other piece of it is that about not being comfortable even imagining that I could ever be that vulnerable? Because I don't know many people that are unsheltered or don't have a home and are living moment to moment on the street, are like, woohoo, great life I got here.
Right. Yeah.
Right. And so they're hurting. And there's a lot of systems in place that don't help them. And so what can we do to offer them kindness, support, resources? And the answer is, I think it has to be case by case. I think we have to be realistic about how big the problem can be and what our role is, and also do something when we can. That's our responsibility.
And I'm happy to see, I don't know, you're in North Carolina, is that correct?
Mm-hmm. I am.
I don't know what it's like there. I met a beautiful young lady up at our state capitol, name's Elizabeth, and she is, I think, the director of the Utah. Now, see, I got the tickle. The Utah Substance Abuse and Mental Health up there at the state capitol. And she invited me to sit in on one of their meetings, one of their quarterly meetings. And I couldn't make it up to the Capitol, so I just did it through the Zoom. And I was really, really happy to see that there are some individuals who are finally starting to open their eyes, right? Going, yeah, our system's broken. we need to make some changes, right? We've got to take different steps to help these individuals who are battling with whatever it is that they're battling with. And I did hear some comments, though, of some people. And it was just coming to the end, and I was really starting to chime in. And Elizabeth was giving me that chance to chime in, but then someone else jumped in. And one of the gentlemen said, you know, basically what we got to do is we got to start with the family first. We got to get with the family first. And we got to get the family while their kids are still young, and we got to get them to understand. And I understand a little bit where this gentleman's coming from. However, I'm also shaking my head going, no, 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 no. And again, this is just my belief on it, right? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of these kids are growing up in the families where their parents are battling the addiction. Mm-hmm. And for these kids, a lot of my guests said, hey, I just thought this was normal life for everyone. I just thought every family did this, right? Where my parents came home from work and they drank. I thought my friends' parents came home and drank, or whatever, because that's what they see on a daily basis. Mm-hmm. It's like, no, that's not what it is. To me, I mean, I believe it is very important that I think we need to change laws to where anybody that goes into recovery, family goes into recovery at the same time. Because I am a firm believer, after hanging with my friend Dave and some other people in the recovery community, it's that if you turn around and you take them out of recovery and put them back in the same toxic environment of family members that don't know how to use their words properly or how to communicate properly, you've got a good chance of pushing them right back into relapse.
Okay, so there's a lot also to unpack there, Al. I think that, yes, my words have power and impact, and I don't have the capacity nor power to make someone else use, unless I'm actually making the food or the substance or the behavior happen to them personally. Like, I'm not able to make that happen.
Okay.
Do I think that a mandate for families to have to go through coaching, counseling, a program with some continuing care would be a valuable and important thing for anyone who seeks help for addiction? Heck yeah, all for it. I agree with you 100%. For a different reason.
Okay.
Yes. Will it help it be a more cohesive, potentially understanding and empathic connection between them after treatment? Will that improve that? Potentially, yes. But I want it because I want us to start recognizing the destruction on the family of this disease and arm them with resources to help them move forward in a healthier way. Not to keep the other person sober, because they can't.
Right.
So I would say there's a multi-tier approach, right? There's how do we help the people that are already struggling? How do we help the people who are in families where there's addiction? How do we help people have skills of refusal and protection for themselves, knowing the risk their family has? You know what I mean? So there's a multi-layer approach, and I think all of them are important. No one has the power to make someone use, and no one has the power to make someone recover. If we did, there'd be no addiction, because there's so much love and desire to fix our loved ones and attempts that I'd be gladly retired.
Yeah. That's a strong word, fix. Right? Because I remember when my wife was in one of the recovery centers and one of her sisters came to visit her, and I happened to be there at that same time. And we sat down in a little room, nice, comfortable little room with couches and everything. And her sister said, so have they fixed you yet? And oh my gosh, my wife exploded. She's like, don't you ever use that word around me, because I'm not broken, right? They're not here to fix me. So, yeah. And I've heard a few other people in the recovery community say that they don't like that word either.
Yeah. And I think words matter, right? Like,
yeah,
words matter for an individual. So what I try to do when I work with families is meet them where they are, right? My language is my language, and what I use for me is what I use for me. I'm going to come alongside someone in a coaching relationship. I'm going to find out where they're at and what language matters to them. If they want to use substance use disorder versus addiction, great. That's what we'll use.
Mhm.
But if their loved one chooses to say, I'm a recovering addict, that's their choice. And we have to respect that for whatever reasons they're deciding to call themselves that. If they want to say, I'm chemically dependent, or I have so language is important. The big thing is what's important to the people involved, not
Yeah.
what's important to me.
Amen. Yeah, I agree with you on that one full-heartedly. What
I was damaged goods in my mind way before my addiction ever started. And my disease empathically, not the right word, it constantly pushed that on me. So it pounded it into me. It wasn't empathic. It was brutal.
Yeah.
And so for me, I don't feel a good feeling with the word fixed either, but I was broken. And so for me, the recovery tools have helped me heal myself and find other ways to engage in the world that I'm forever grateful for. If somebody said to me, are you fixed yet? I would probably overreact myself because I would be offended.
Mhm.
I would like to think I'd be mature enough to say I'm on a path of healing. Thanks for asking. But I'd probably not react that way either, especially in early recovery when I'm still in a treatment center, because I'm already raw and vulnerable at that point.
Yeah. Yeah, your brain's still trying to clear out all the fog, right?
That too.
A lot of the fog, yeah.
Mhm.
How important is it for individuals in recovery, even if they're long-term recovery, right? So some people say, they've been clean for 6 months, yet they use the word long-term recovery because they don't want to put a label talking about certain words. Because this individual that I was talking about, gosh, a long time in recovery, not going to meetings, not talking to the people that I feel like they needed to speak with, right, to help, because basically all it was them and their partner. That was it. And I was talking to a friend who is in long-term recovery, and he was saying, the way I see it, they were white knuckling it the whole time. Because if they're not constantly working the program, they're doing everything they can to say, I got this, I can do it. But yet, as life starts happening to you, you're grabbing onto that steering wheel tighter and tighter and tighter and tighter before finally it goes off.
So a lot of what I hear from your friend is very much 12-step recovery language that
Yeah.
I'm affiliated with.
Mm-hmm.
It may not be the same language in other modalities that people choose for recovery. And that's, again, whatever works for the person. If I look at people who are in 12-step recovery who are not engaging in recovery meetings, are not working with a sponsor, are not using the tools, are not connecting with the people in the program that help us remember why we sit in the seats, our disease has a lot more room to manipulate us. You hear terms like dry drunk, white knuckling. To me, what that represents is someone who has put down the substance or the behavior that's addiction for them and not stayed active in the tools that give them the freedom to enjoy life fully. They tend to be irritable, discontent, reactive, because there's not, it's like a balance, a scale, right? So the substance does all of these things to us and for us, we think. We put that aside because we don't use. If we don't fill the other side of the scale with those resources to help us, this becomes a very real option again. So when we get into recovery and we're embracing our program and we're highly motivated and invested, we've got that going on, we start seeing changes in us that feel good. And integrity, authenticity, honesty, follow through, accountability, like all these wonderful traits that may have been robbed of us by our disease. And so if we don't keep working, that void or hole that we tried to fill with substances or behavior is still there. And there's only so long before we're going to go back to what we know works, even if it's hurting us.
Yeah. That makes so much sense. Even when, he was even telling me about it, it was making sense because that's exactly what I've seen in the individual. Just a second. Okay. So yes, that's the same thing that I saw as well.
And I think it's really important, Al, to say that as much as we want to, human nature, deconstruct what happens for someone before they relapse, who we love, and try and figure it out, we got to take the reflection on us. Was I more vigilant? Was I going back to old behaviors? Was I engaging in the tools that saved me? Was I active in my program of recovery, or was I just hanging on to the wheel too? Because they're often parallel.
Yeah. And again, with you speaking about this tonight, again, this is a whole different area for me. However, I'm agreeing 100% with what you're saying, right? Because when they say it's a family disease, it's a family disease. All parties suffer. All of us have our own little program we have to go through. All of us have our triggers. We have our boundaries. We're in that same box with a divider, I guess, between us, right? That we both have tool pouches, but yet we also have our own tools, different tools in there to help us. And so if we're not using the right tools as well, we start falling back just like the person who's battling with the addiction.
Right.
Wow. How come it's taken me this flipping long to hear you say this, to go, oh my gosh, the light bulbs are going off.
Let them go off and don't judge it as I should have known sooner. That doesn't help any of us.
Right.
It is so parallel. There's a Jellinek symptoms chart that was created many, many years ago that takes you through like a bell curve of the progression of the illness into the demise of how it affects us. And then it takes you into the recovery. And it's literally, like that.
Okay.
I've taken every symptom on that Jellinek chart for a person with a substance use disorder or an addiction. And I have used the other side of the bell curve to do the family ones. They're exactly alike.
Wow.
So if we're going down through this disease and we're having obsession preoccupation, okay, for an addict, what's our obsession preoccupation? Now, when am I going to use? How am I going to use? How can I hide it? How much am I going to get? Where am I going to, right? On the family side, what's the preoccupation? Where are they? What are they doing? Are they okay?
Are they using? Yeah.
In early use, it's like observation, curious, to full on vigilance, right? For the person using, it's social using, to then starting to isolate and then being preoccupied that that's their primary relationship, right? So you watch that go down. The isolation, that absolutely changes on both sides. So all of those go down. The same is true on the recovery side. If one is working a program, but the other is not, they're going to stay here while the other one's growing and climbing. And return to use can happen and they go back down a few, but they get back in their program and they move. But this person, it's down there again and not finding it's a disservice. Family members absolutely deserve every tool possible to heal from this freaking disease.
Yeah.
It's whooped our butts.
Boy, has it.
And so the parallel is real. The hard part too is, as a parallel is like this, in early recovery, family members can really struggle because it feels like it's more like this, because their loved ones going to meetings and got a sponsor and working the program. And it's like, they're doing all of these things outside of our relationship. And even though I want it because I want them sober, I feel disconnected still. Again, if the family doesn't do the same types of things, that reconnection won't come as easily, but it will if we're both on a parallel path. And I think that's hard for families in early recovery. I've heard many family members say to me, might as well be using, they're never home. And I said, tell me more, what's going on? They're going to this meeting, the phone's going because they've got this call. I'd really like some attention. When's it my turn? I've waited this long. I said, I hear you.
Wow.
Is that person using or working on things that are going to help bring them back to you in a healthier way? Can you remember that? Meanwhile, are you willing to put your energy into some of those things too, trusting that both of you doing them makes the outcome healthier? Or are you going to stay resentful and irritated and think they're selfish still, which it does feel selfish, early recovery, but it's not. It's actually self-care, which people may say is semantics, but it isn't, because selfish in the disease is all about doing what the disease demands of us. Selfish in recovery is actually, like, I think of these examples in my marriage, and I'm like, oh. In early recovery, my husband was the biggest pain in my butt. When I was newly abstinent, I was a porcupine. He came too near me with his words or his actions, and I'm like, ah. It had nothing to do with my husband and everything to do with me not knowing how to manage my feelings because I no longer had my numbing agent.
Yeah.
If I didn't have a meeting to go to where I'd sit there and I'd talk and listen and hear people say things that were helpful to me to see my blind spots, and if I didn't have a sponsor, I'll never forget. I called my sponsor and I was like, my husband, right? She'd listen. She'd then say, when we are disturbed, it is something within us. What's going on with you? Don't do that. It's about him, you know? And she would be like, when we are disturbed, it is something about us. Right? I'd get so angry. I was a mess in early recovery, fully admitted. And she gave me the suggestion. She's like, when you want to go after him because you're mad at him, call me. Tell me what's going on. Let's see whether you want to go after him after we talk. And if you do, go ahead. But if you don't, you know, I would probably put a pretty hefty wager that saved our marriage.
Yeah.
Because in very short time of that pattern changing, that awareness being shown to me, that guidance from somebody who knew better than I in that really vulnerable time could show me a different way to communicate with my husband, a different way to feel my feelings and figure out what they were instead of just lashing out because I couldn't tolerate them. So think about it. Even though it's hard for me to go to meetings when our kids were little and I'd be gone and I'd have my calls in the morning and my calls in the evening and my sponsors and he clearly said to me one day when I almost, in his mind, relapsed, which was another moment of seeing the ugly in Margaret. I'll tell you the story if you're okay with it.
Absolutely. You bet.
So my recovery is food addiction. And people often say, well, how do you do that? You have to eat. And you're right. You have to eat. The program I work is no sugar unless fifth or beyond an ingredient label, and no gluten, no wheat. And I give my food to my sponsor every morning, and I follow a meal plan. And I've done that since 2005 by the grace of a higher power. Wow. And my sponsor and my program. And so we were, it was in the first year. And we had little ones, you know, like 2 and 5. And I went to a meeting, came home, and I was feeling great. It was a great meeting. And I walk in the door and my kids are in bed or somewhere. And my husband was cleaning up the kitchen. And I'm like, you know what? Let me help him out. Such a great guy. He's helping me out all the time. Let me help him out. So he was in the kitchen. I go up to the staircase and there was a box of a good food addict. I won't forget what it was. Chips Ahoy cookies with the wrapper that sounds crinkly when you shut it.
Yeah.
And I was shutting the wrapper and putting the top down. And I hear from the kitchen, you're not going to eat those, are you?
Uh-oh.
Oh, no, he did. Right now. I'm like, what? I come around the corner and I have steam. I mean, I am like, hold the box. I'm like, what did you just say to me? Are you freaking kidding me? You think you can tell me what I can and cannot eat? I will eat whatever I want. I will eat this whole box if I want to. You can't do this to me. And you know what he had the ability to say to me in that moment that I still to this day cannot believe? They said, Margaret, I don't want to lose you to food again.
Wow.
It was like water in my face. But what it was so powerful about it was his truth. It was not accusatory. And it was something I didn't realize he felt. Because in our disease, we think we're the only ones we're hurting, even though we know on some level that's not true. So even though there's challenges in recovery when our loved ones are actively working a program and we are missing them, I assure you that if they're invested in a healthy recovery and using the tools and working with people, those people help us engage in relationships in a healthier way. And I understand how it feels similar.
Yeah.
And insecurities can come up.
Margaret, everything you just talked about and sharing your story is exactly what's been happening on my end. Exactly. I got to a point where I stayed completely quiet because anytime I opened my mouth, it was the wrong thing to say. This has been going on for months. I started realizing the landslide was starting to come back because I could see the behaviors starting to change, right? And I would say something like what your husband said. And I got that same reaction. And yeah, because I even said a few times, it scares me, right? Because they've worked so hard to get to where they were at, to just throw it away. Maybe that's not even the right word to say. I don't know. Or just to, I don't want to say give up, because I don't think really that's what it was. It's just, I even asked the individual, what was it? Help me understand. What was it? I got the word anxiety. It was anxiety. Okay, anxiety. I've heard this talked about a lot. I've heard it in a lot of AA meetings, right? Where people have got up and dealt with the same thing. Again, you got a nail to put in a piece of wood, pull out that freaking hammer and use it. Don't pull out a screwdriver. So why don't they pull out that hammer? I mean, what's keeping them from?
Addiction is a pathological relationship with a substance or a behavior that supersedes every other human need we have. So let that sink in for anyone listening, because I didn't know that. That we in our disease will do things we absolutely abhor, think we would never do, because we're so controlled by something that has that much power over us. That's a horribly shameful place to be. When one puts that down and engages in recovery, all of the stuff underneath that it's been numbing. And if any of us think we can do that by ourselves, it's very hard. And it's very hard on the people we love.
Yeah.
I would say, because I work with the families, and you're not my client, so I would never presume to tell you what my suggestions would be for you. But what I would say in the situation, if I was working with a family member, is, what tools have you been using? What people have you leaned into? Have you noticed your relapse behaviors, if you reflect, started sooner than just that blow up?
Yeah.
Because usually they do. They just don't show as obviously. Was I using I feel statements? Because you said very clearly right then, I was scared seeing this landslide start.
Yeah.
And the other thing is, are we talking to someone who's actively using? And if they are we talking to them or their disease? And usually we can tell pretty quickly because of the response we get or the reaction we get. And if it's like those reactions to my husband, when he commented on what I was eating, my disease was front and center.
Oh yeah, you're calling it
When
out.
it was not even about calling it out. It was about me being told what to do, which, how dare you, even though exactly what he's saying was the right thing not to do, right? Like he wasn't saying anything that was bad per se,
Yeah.
but it's that disease was like, you're going to challenge me. You're going to tell me what to do. Right. It was like, I didn't even have an awareness that it happened, Al, until he said, I don't want to lose you. And it was like, I had to stop, because it wasn't about me. It was about his reality. And it was enough to reach Margaret.
Hmm.
And not always does that work. There are other times where we had drag out fights that there was no way we could, unless we walked away from each other. Right. But having my sponsor tell me to talk to her before him, I was so insulted by that. I'm like a freaking counselor. Are you kidding me? I can't talk to my husband. What the hell do you think you're telling me? It doesn't matter what degrees I had, because in those moments, that functional person, that healthier person disappeared and the disease came up.
Yeah.
And so I needed someone to be able to call me on my crap. And that's what my sponsor did.
Well, and that's what they're there for, right? I mean, seriously, they are, and they're extremely good at doing it. And that's another thing that, yeah, sponsor on this other end, non-existent. You know?
And is it on my end?
Yeah.
Because I can say, flipping the script in my own life as a mother, my sponsors, my fellows in Al-Anon, my fellows on the codependency family side of it, that pre-existed my food addiction program, so vitally important to help me be a healthier mom, healthier partner, healthier coach, healthier everything.
Yeah. And
Because
I can see. Oh, go ahead.
That old tape of wanting to take charge and feel like I don't have to watch the suffering of people I love and I can somehow make it better. Oof, she's always right there.
Yeah. Wow, this has been such a great show for me. Margaret, thank you so much for all this information that you've shared with me, because it's crazy how, you know, there are no coincidences. That's just how I see it. This show happened exactly the time it needed to happen, especially with what I'm going through in my life. And it's crazy how we can fall back, right? On both sides.
Mhm.
And, you know, I had a gentleman on my show I don't know, he may have been my 15th or 20th episode, which is crazy because we are almost at 200 episodes. I think we're like 6 shows away or 5 shows away from hitting 200 episodes, which is really cool. Thank you. And he battled a porn addiction for 2 decades, starting at the age of 13, and thought about taking his life, told his whole story, and higher power saved him, right? He even came from a very religious family background. And he goes, Al, you know what's crazy is, he goes, I have been clean, I think he said, for 25 years, something like that. And his wife is now battling an eating addiction. And he goes, I have found myself saying the same things people used to say to me that would tick me off. And now here I am saying it to my wife. And he says, it took me some time to realize it, right? And he goes, here I am. I know this is not the right thing to say because I didn't like it when someone said it to me. However, here I am finding myself saying it to my wife, and she's getting ticked off at me. And I'm like, that is ironic right there. That is crazy.
It's also coming from, and I say this all the time, and I hope people hear this, the best of intention and love and a lot of fear.
Yes.
And so the people that are loving someone with a disease, an addiction, they are seeing a train wreck slowly or fast happen in front of them. And they're starting to think of every possible scenario to try and intervene. And the interventions don't work because the disease reacts to them, pushes back against them, manipulates them. And the person is well-intentioned, but this disease is so complex in that it uses it against them. My husband was truly not saying anything bad.
Yeah.
In my head, in my disease mind, are you kidding me? So it's like, we have to recognize that he had no malintent. I couldn't hear it from him. I couldn't hear it from him in that moment. I reacted to him. But if I had used, I should say this, if I had eaten then and there in front of him, it wouldn't have been his fault. And that's important. It would have been because I didn't use the tools of my recovery to stop me going back to what I knew was killing me.
Yeah.
As a way to cope. But would I've had justification in the minds of anybody listening who doesn't know this disease? I'd be like, well, he was a jerk, or he shouldn't have said anything. He made you eat. My God, my disease would have had a field day with that.
Oh, heck
At the end
yes.
of the day, that's not true.
Yeah.
And it's important to remember that. So our words are important, but they also won't make someone use. So it's really important to try to be truthful with people we love, not be abusive, not be abused by their disease, and also recognize that there's a monkey chatter piece and some stuff going on in us that might be driving our reactions that we need to take a look at.
Well put. Yeah. And yeah, I did some therapy with this individual, and that's exactly what our therapist told us, why their reaction was the way it was because of what I said. Because I felt like I wasn't doing anything wrong, right? Again, it's the care. I care for this individual, and I am being truthful because that's just how I am. And I'm not doing it to be hurtful. I'm not doing it to throw daggers. I'm doing it because this is how I'm feeling, and I'm telling you how I feel. And I can't make Margaret feel happy if she wants to be sad, right? Or I can't make her sad if she wants to be happy. Those choices are her choices. I don't know. I could put a marshmallow or a piece of candy in front of her and say, here, take this. It'll make you smile. However, it's still your choice, right? It's still the choice of how you want to take it, I guess, or leave it.
So if I have recovery, I could make that choice. If I don't, that's a hard choice to make.
Yeah.
And I think that you're absolutely right. No one can make anyone else feel anything. It's our feelings are our responsibilities. How we communicate them can help.
Yes.
Using I feel statements and owning our own stuff. The other thing that I think is really important is getting truly brutally honest with my words, whether they were malintended, because I don't think people intend to hurt. I do think we're really manipulative as family members, and we can absolutely have an underlying motivation to say this, because maybe I'll shock the crap out of them and they'll snap out of it, right? Probably not a great strategy. If my reason for saying this is because I'm going to make you see something or change something, if I'm saying it because it's something I need to say because it's important to me and my boundaries, very different scenario.
Yeah. I love it. Last question here.
Yeah.
What would be your main message for our listeners today with what we spoke about?
I don't know if it's my main message, but here's what comes to me because I was thinking about it while we were talking. My heart aches for the person you share about and for you. My wish is that we can be compassionate towards ourselves when we find ourselves in these situations for maybe not doing the best thing we wish we could have done. And also have incredible compassion for that person who's suffering and hurting so badly that they've returned to what they know destroys them. And that doesn't mean that we don't have boundaries and protect ourselves. That means we love the person, we care for the person, and we protect ourselves with boundaries from their disease, one day at a time. And more importantly than all of that, that every family member deserves support and recovery tools. And so my wish and my takeaway would be from this conversation, whether you're the person with the disease of addiction, with a substance or behavior, or whether you're the person whose drug of no choice is a walking, talking human being that you try to caretake, please find support. Alone, we cannot do this. With connection of others who understand this, we can find paths out that are a lot happier, healthier, and more peaceful.
Great message. Great message. I spoke with someone the other day that basically said that too. We cannot do this alone at both sides, right? We cannot do it alone. I really do believe we need to have a higher power, whatever that higher power is for that individual. It could be God, the universe, a rock, a mountain, a goldfish, a crystal, whatever, like you've said many times in the show, whatever works for you, you know. The opposite of addiction is connection, right? We have to have that connection. It's a must. And I have seen that with all the guests that we've had on the show, and just learning from individuals like yourself, Margaret, and just for our listeners to understand, Margaret battled with an eating addiction. And if you've heard this conversation, it's just like we were talking with someone who has drug or alcohol or opioids or sex or porn, gambling. It's all the same. The brain is firing the exact same way. That goes to show it's not the substance. It's just the Band-Aid. That's all it is.
And every person's way to cope, if they have the disease, may be different with what they cope with. I tried alcohol. Wasn't going to lose control, baby. Never going to get drunk. Have never been drunk. But didn't see the fact that I'm gaining hundreds of pounds and losing hundreds of pounds from my life as being out of control. Something was wrong. So I think the main thing is, if things are out of balance in our life, when things have impacted our quality of relationships, our quality of life, when we've crossed our values and boundaries and border, what we feel is important to us, when we're lying for something, when we're behaving in a characteristic that's not who we core are, we need to look at what's that relationship with that substance or behavior and see if we need help to not be at its mercy.
I love it. Margaret, it is always such a pleasure to have you on the show. I just enjoy the heck sitting down and chatting with you. I mean, I could spend another hour with you on this show, but I know it's getting late where you're at. And we actually have a cloud cover evening, and it's raining a little bit, which is nice. We've been battling with some 100-degree plus weather, like a lot of states are dealing with right now, and it's definitely hit here. And we still have snow in our mountains, which is crazy. 100 degrees in the valley, and we still got probably 3, 4, maybe even 10 feet in some areas up in the mountains. It's nuts, but
probably beautiful though.
Oh, it is beautiful. It is definitely beautiful. Yeah, I went on a beautiful hike last Sunday, and I'll have to shoot you over some pictures. It's the snow. There was still snow floating on top of the lake. Just beautiful. Margaret, thank you again for your time. Thank you for taking an hour out of your evening to spend it with us, and for all your knowledge that you share. And I hope we have an opportunity to continue to do this and build on things. And I hope one day I get to meet you in person so I can give you a big hug, because I love hugs. And so maybe that time will come sooner or later. I don't know, but I hope it does come.
I'm a hugger too, so I'm all for it. And I would just like to say, thank you for having me on. And if people ever want to look into what I do, my website is embracefamilyrecovery.com. But most importantly, I say this at the end of all my podcasts. It's kind of my catchphrase. Take care of you, Al, and everyone listening. Just take care of you. It doesn't mean you neglect anyone else. If we take care of ourselves, we have more to offer everybody else.
And that's great advice. Hey guys, listen to her podcast. She has an incredible podcast. We are big supporters of all podcasts here. We're not here to be the best. We're here to support every single person out there, because it's going to take a plethora of us, right, to make a change. So again, thank you to all our guests co-hosts when we do have them, and all our amazing sponsors, especially to all you listeners. Thank you so much for making this possible and helping us get to 200 episodes, which is right around the corner. I'm so flipping excited. I'm hoping to have a very, very special guest on. Well, they're all special. One of my guests said, yeah, you say all your guests are special. And I'm like, well, that's because they are. It's true, right? They're all special.
They are.
So remember this, guys. We're going to leave you, as we do at the end of every show. Remember, addiction is giving up everything for one thing, and recovery is giving up one thing for everything. We're out.